On TexasFootball.com, Max,
Yes.
you will find a story. And we have many stories up on TexasFootball.com, but this one in particular is relatively big. Last week, the UIL announced that there was going to be a change during the next realignment. And if your eyes just glazed over because realignment is not your thing, I totally understand.
Yeah.
Realignment can be really in the weeds,
Sure.
and it can be really like you've got to be into it, and
Yeah.
you've got to understand why it's important.
Yeah.
So if your eyes just glazed over, I understand. It's a lot to
Sure.
unpack. But I want to explain why last week's announcement that 5A was splitting is a pretty seismic event in Texas high school football.
Seismic.
How about that?
Ooh.
Yeah, I had a whole week to think about what word I was going
Yeah.
to use. So, here's the gist of it. That the UIL went to the superintendents of the Class 5A schools, and they said, hey, do you want to split into divisions? Now, I want to explain what that means. Presently, let's take Class 6A. Class 6A is comprised of 240-something schools. I don't have their number in front. I think 244. 244, the 244 biggest schools in the state. They range from 6,500 school kids to like 2,400 ultimately. Okay? They are one classification. And when the playoffs roll around, they're divided up into 32 districts and by geography. And when the playoffs roll around, the top 4 teams from each district make the playoffs. Now, you take those top 4 teams. I know, your eyes are already glazing over. You take those top 4 teams, and the 2 largest schools of those 4 teams go to the Division I bracket. The 2 smaller schools of those playoff teams go to the Division II bracket. Okay? They are different brackets. They don't interact. There's that. Let's skip down to 4A. Okay? 4A is already pre-divided into divisions. So, while Class 4A spans between about 1,000 kids and I think it's like 400 kids as enrollment, really what it does is that there's 4A Division 1, which is 1,000 through about 650 or
Right.
700, and then there's 4A Division 2, which is about 700 through about 400. And these numbers might be a little bit off, but hang with me here. So, those things are already pre-split. 4 teams they're split into 16 different districts. 4 teams from each teams make the playoffs, but you already know which bracket they're going to. The enrollments at that point, once the districts are set, are pretty much irrelevant. Okay? 5A, before this in this current realignment,
I'm still with you.
is like 6A. Okay? There's one big classification, no divisions. We figure it out once we know who the playoff teams are.
Okay.
The ruling and the superintendents ended up voting that, yes, we do want to split into divisions for the 2018 realignment. They voted 144. They voted 144 to 77, basically 2-1,
Okay.
that they want to split. So starting in 2018, in February 2018, when the realignment comes out, there will be a 5A Division 1, which is comprised of the teams were in 5A, but the top half of them.
Yep.
And then there will be 5A Division 2, which will be the bottom half of them. There will be these smaller schools. So, let's talk about what this actually means. Okay? The biggest thing that is going on here is that the superintendents want there to be a little more even enrollment splits. So that, for example, the biggest school in Class 5A, oh, I had this up. Do I still have it up? Did you do it, Greg?
You're good at this.
I am good at this. Okay. So the largest school in Class 5A, do you know what it is?
Denton Ryan.
Mansfield Summit.
Oh, okay.
Mansfield Summit has an enrollment of 2,147.
Right there.
Okay?
Yeah.
2,147. They are the largest 5A school, right on the doorstep
Yep.
of 4A. Okay? They're in District 10. Also in District 10 is let's see, who's the smallest team from District 10? I want to make sure I have this up. I should have done some research beforehand.
Mm.
Okay, so the smallest school in District 10 is oh, come on, like Mansfield Timberview, for example. Mansfield Timberview has an enrollment of 1758.
Okay.
Pretty decent size, although there's not that huge split.
Right.
But they want to make it so that you have, instead of there being a theoretically a district with 2,400 kids,
Yes.
and a district, and in that same district having a team with 1,200 kids,
Right.
twice as big.
Right.
They want to split it so that now you have more comparable enrollments within a district. Basically, making sure that you don't have a giant team playing a non-giant team. The other thing about it is that there are teams that make the playoffs. That last year there were 30 teams that made the playoffs in the wrong bracket, so to speak. That is, if the split had happened, they would have been in a different bracket. Most notably is that you have weird things like the Colony. Okay, the Colony has an enrollment of a lot. The Colony has an enrollment of 2,060.
Right.
2,060. They played in the Division II bracket last year. Okay. Meanwhile, Beaumont Central, which has an enrollment of 1,471,
ended up in D1.
Just because of the way the enrollments broke
Right.
down. So, those are the advantages. The advantage is that we are going to have a lot more even. It's also an advantage for people like us because we don't have to worry about if this team makes a playoffs, does that bump them to Division 1?
It means we're just doing it with 6A and that's it.
You're just doing it with 6A, and you already know what bracket you're going to.
Yeah.
Beyond that, for fans, it's a lot easier to understand. We're either in the playoffs or we're not.
Right.
It's basically it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the drawbacks.
Okay.
The biggest drawback and the big elephant in the room is travel.
Yep.
Because for a number of teams,
Texas High. They came out of the woodwork. They were very upset. And I understand why.
Texas High, in particular, they are left out on an island. Here's what I mean by that. Texas High, in this current first of all, Texas High is a very big school, okay? Right. Texas High
fluctuates between 6 and 5, right?
Yes, I believe that's...
wherever the line moves?
Yes. Texas High has an enrollment of 1,920. Yeah. They are a pretty big 5A, okay? They're not going up to 6A. They're not going down to 4A. They are pretty clearly a big 5A. They are currently in district, no, I had that wrong. Actually, I was looking at Texas City. Texas High is, 1914. Okay, they're in District 16.
Yep.
Okay, here's the problem. The problem is that every other team in their district, and remember, these are done by geography, every other team in their district is going to be in Division 2.
Right.
So they are left out on an island, all by themselves in Texarkana. The nearest teams that they will that they can geographically be put in a district with are in Dallas. Like, they are probably going to be put in a district with Mesquite, with Highland Park, which is a 2.5-hour, 2-hour, 45-minute drive.
Yeah.
Now, all my friends in West Texas are going, pfft.
Right.
So what?
Yeah.
So what? We've dealt with this. We've always dealt with this. Yeah. We've dealt with this forever.
Right.
And that's true. But these programs are not used to it, and it's going to make travel more difficult for teams like them, like Port Arthur Memorial, which is also out on an island, which is going from traveling 15 miles to play a district game to traveling 100 miles.
Right. And while there are schools who are used to doing this out west, look, everyone would prefer they didn't have to.
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Everyone should only have to travel 30 miles to do anything.
And things are going to get worse for teams out west like San Angelo Lakeview.
Right.
That I made that chart that they are actually the second closest school in their region is Aledo.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
But now San Angelo Lakeview is an outlier.
Right.
But it's going to make things a little bit different. Overall, here's the gist of it. I do think that there is a reasonable argument both for and against the measure. I do. You have to decide which is more valuable. Is it more valuable to have less travel, or is it more valuable to have more balance in the enrollments? And I don't think there's a right answer. I think that it matters for different teams. And let's be real. The vast majority of 5A teams, not much is going to change. Teams in the DFW Metroplex, teams in the Houston area, teams in San Antonio, for the vast majority of teams, travel will increase a little bit, but it won't be super duper noticeable.
Right.
There are some teams though that are going to get the shaft from this, that from a travel perspective. So you have to decide which is more valuable, the travel or the balance. And look, the superintendents decided they wanted the split, so we will have the split starting in 2018. Right. That is happening. So it's an interesting thing. We'll have more. We'll talk about it more and more throughout the year, but it is a pretty seismic shift in the way that Texas high school football is going to do business starting in 2018. Let me make one other thing clear, because I saw some confusion about this. The same number of teams make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. We're not increasing the number of teams. We're not increasing the number of state champions.
Right, we're just rearranging them.
We're just rearranging them. That's only what's happening.
Right.
You've still got the same blocks.
Yeah.
You're just building something different.
Right, because people don't understand in these divisions there's only 16 districts instead of 32.
Correct.
So.
That's exactly it. So it will be interesting. The new realignment will be very interesting, especially as we will find out. First and foremost, exactly how these teams want to, how these teams are going to be laid out, and they're going to be teams that are playing teams they're not used to playing.
Right.
Texas High is probably going to have to travel to Dallas.
It's going to be fun for us to cover.
Sure,
but I understand all their gripes.
And in an age where public school budgets are not exactly the most popular thing in the world,
no,
this could have an impact. So.